Hello, everybody. Welcome to Studio 8.1, episode 73. With me, Jarvis Todd, publisher of Telemedia Magazine, Telemedia News, proprietor of World Telemedia, and my old friend upstairs, the editor-in-chief of all of the above, and the person who most recently put together an excellent conference at the World Telemedia Show that we ran in Dubai. Hello, Paul.
Hello, mate. I'll tip my hat to all and
Nice.
sundry. Yes,
You are
hello.
creative.
Yes, feeling creative. I am feeling creative.
So what we're going to do, Paul, last time we took a couple of the kind of key points from the conference. We're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive. We're going to talk primarily about the one of the most important aspects of the telemedia industry, which is driving traffic, specifically for MVAS services. How do we get those eyeballs? Where's the traffic coming from? And then obviously diving a little bit deeper, what are we then trying to sell all those wonderful content hungry consumers out there? And with AI just infiltrating almost every aspect of the telemedia industry, we're going to look at the role of AI within the sort of marketing traffic generating world. And we're also then going to finish up by talking about how some of those content creators are introducing AI into their businesses to really enhance the services that are being offered to telemedia consumers across the globe. So without further ado, let's sort of talk about the first element, which you highlighted, was just the basics. How are we generating traffic at the moment? And I think you picked up on some interesting points from one of the sessions that you hosted.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, the sort of big thing is how do you get traffic, and increasingly, it's interesting how that's changed over the years that we've been doing this, particularly sort of relatively recently. That very much the talk is all about Google, obviously, and about social media sites, particularly the mainstream ones: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, those sorts of things. Um, and there is a sort of tendency for it sort of like an either or. Do we go down the social route? Do we use Google? Do we use affiliate marketing? How do we do this? Whereas what really came out of the show for me is that there isn't one solution really. What you really need to do is mix them, but you've got to get that mix right. Uh, Now, specifically, if you look at social media, where a lot of traffic is coming from, that also is quite fragmented between all these different sites: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat. There are many others depending on the region. And you've got to really understand the split in those things between the different regions, and understand that first of all before you can even then start to work out what your split between Google and social and affiliate might likely be. This was really sort of brought home by Pedro Bilro from Apex Ad Buyers at the show, who basically explained how you got to sort of understand this social media split, and how that is different in different regions. This is what he said.
It's a matter of distribution of the social media, because Instagram, TikTok are much disruptive in terms of the mobile apps that exist nowadays. So they are stronger in terms of marketing and usage, of course. And Snapchat, it's a bit behind in the majority of the countries. Even then, there are some countries that use a lot this specific social media. Also because TikTok is banned in some geos. So this is another approach that the kids or younger ages use it. But not just kids, I mean, in general, social media. So we all know that Facebook, it's a higher age usage, and the younger ages are in Instagram and also TikTok. And yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a matter of targeting. Also, this is good for us as media buyer companies or also affiliation. Of course, if you have external media buyers that do media buying in social media, helps us target and use different approaches for them, and also maybe retargeting users through the social media, and try to use multiple channels to try to make the users subscribe to a certain service.
Right, so as Pedro sort of eloquently puts it there, social media isn't just a simple thing. It's not about, oh, if you want young people, let's go to Snapchat. If you want older people, let's go to Facebook. Uh, it is about finding the right one in the right region and mixing it. And it often comes down to not just the age group you might be after, but what kind of content it is you're trying to sell. So, and I think as well, the other thing that he told me separately outside of the conference is that it does also increasingly come down to sort of how it changes on a sort of day, week basis. It's not a consistent thing. So your strategy around social has to be very much mix and match, but also constantly sort of evolved and reiterated all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think I mentioned this in our last vodcast, where one of the phrases that we've been using for many years is fragmented media landscape, and we were saying that 10 years ago. Boy, oh boy, we had no idea just how fragmented the media landscape was going to be. And as you say, I mean, it points out obviously the demographic differences between social media platforms is important, but it's when that's taken in context with the regions, as you say, the content and everything else. And just when you thought that that their job was complicated, it gets even more complicated, because I think we then go on to talk about in that particular session, how also in specific regions different browsers are being used. And of course, you mentioned Google at the top of the vodcast, but there's an awful lot more search engines out there at play for some of our intrepid media buyers and merchants to have to deal with, right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's sort of often billed as sort of, where do you get your traffic? Google social affiliates. But actually, Google is more of a catch-all term for browsers. So it's how do you use browsers? And of course, Google's not always the sort of main way of doing it. In most markets, it is, but that means that like 80% of people come from it. There's still this other 20% that can be found by a more regional approach to looking at browsers. So even that's quite fragmented in addition to the social side. And Chris from Mesh Ads in the same session, as you say, with to the clip we've just seen from Pedro, uh, really went into some sort of detail about this and what that actually means. This is what he said.
I would like to add on that you really should define your mix or your channels that you think are the correct ones. And I believe that Google should always be the base because it's the biggest and globally most scalable traffic source. But maybe you have 80% of your traffic on Google, but then you identify, okay, I'm running campaigns in Indonesia, and I go to Roman because he has those affiliates working with Line Messenger or with Viber Messenger, whatever is locally relevant. And because for me, it's not worthwhile my effort to launch dedicated campaigns by myself on that, and then you can scale by adding this. Or in Africa, there's Phoenix browser, which is a web browser that many users in Africa are using. For me, as an agency, it's not worthwhile to explore that because maybe it has 10% market share in some markets. But if you're really deep into some market and you want to scale there, then look into this. Look at the distribution. Are people really just using Chrome, or are maybe 30% using Phoenix browser or whatever else, where you can develop a strategy? Or in the market where we do a lot of business, Kazakhstan, there is 75% Chrome or Google dominated, but you still have the Russian search engine Yandex with 25-30% market share. So it's very relevant that if you want to scale beyond your base on Google, then you need to look at those things as well.
So there you have it. I mean, a very interesting point I think Chris makes, that if you want to scale up, yes, whilst Google is perhaps the most eye-catching platform in most markets, in very specific markets, you might well find that a significant number of the audience or your potential audience are actually nowhere near Google, and that you need to be very mindful of that. And I think it's interesting to see how or the importance of dealing with absolute specialists within those particular fields. And you represented that really brilliantly in that panel. And I think far from the old days of telemedia, where you've got individual companies being absolutely ferociously competitive, here you've got a really great example of how you've got a social media specialist talking to a Google specialist, working with an affiliate marketing specialist. And far from being competitive and trying to steal each other's business, they see themselves sitting in the marketplace as very complementary providers, which I think from the point of view of anyone attending the show, anyone who wants to take MVAS services into global markets of their choosing, it just goes to show the way the telemedia industry is now structured in a way that really makes that a lot easier than it was, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is that, like you say, complementary. That's what was so interesting about this panel, is that they all fed off each other because they all do need each other. So you can't do it all with Google, you can't do it all with social, you can't do it all with affiliate marketing, but you can do it across all the different regions with the different kinds of content using a mixture of these things. And let's not forget that affiliate marketing, that there is a tendency to look at affiliate marketing as being kind of like, yeah, that we used to talk about that, but we don't anymore. But it still plays a really vital role in doing this, and it plays a role inside kind of how Google is used and other search engines, which is really interesting. Which is what Roman from Golden Goose GG Networks also said at the panel. Let's hear what he had to say.
In this traffic landscape, um, you should understand what is the proper traffic source for your offer, for your geo, for your carrier, because a lot of cases when you cannot run social media traffic or Google traffic, for example, a lot of campaigns, adult campaigns in Europe, in Switzerland, in Brazil, in South Africa. So you cannot run these sources, but you can run affiliate traffic and ad networks directly from adult networks. Second case, affiliate traffic. It's easy to get. I mean, in terms of you can get it quickly. For example, our affiliates can set up push campaign in few hours and run traffic at the moment. Instead of social media, because you need to prepare a lot of things, some tests. So this is the part of traffic landscape, and it can be that because of specifics of geo offers and carriers.
So yeah, interesting there what Roman has to say. I mean, I think it's particularly interesting that he still brings up the adult services because we can't get away from it. That is a big part of the sort of content market. That is, we can't, it's just there, and they do need to be marketed as well. And in many regions, you can't do that through Google and social, and I mean most regions, in fact. So affiliate marketing has that role to play. But I think the really interesting thing that he says is to do with the fact that it's there to sort of pick up round the edges of what you're already doing with Google and with social. And I think it fits in again with what Pedro and Chris both said in the clips we showed there, that it is about this mix. It's about mixing the two things, the three things together to get the most traffic and keep managing and understanding that, which has a massive impact, obviously, on media buying, which we'll come to shortly.
Before we go on to that, I just wanted to also point out, I think the other thing that it might well be obvious, but it was good to hear it sort of really crystallized in that particular session was also don't forget that in certain new markets, you're physically not going to be able to charge as much as you might like as in a more sophisticated market. So your ARPUs are going to get affected. Now, what obviously was made apparent during that session was that the campaigns and developing content within different platforms also comes with its own set of costs. And what I think that the point was made, it wasn't in that particular clip, but it was also interesting. So, well, for example, if you want to get into Bangladesh, then, it's probably not going to be cost effective to run Google campaigns or Facebook campaigns with all that goes with that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. And actually picking up affiliate marketing traffic to get the ball rolling, it is probably your only option. Obviously, depending on whether or not, as Roman pointed out, you're mindful of what is allowed and what is not allowed by your respective carriers in those respective markets. But yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it illustrated perfectly that across the board, the mix is important, but equally, each individual area has its own role to play depending on what content, what strategy you're employing and which markets you're hoping to enter. And obviously, as you rightly point out, in order to enter those markets, you need to do some media buying. And you started talking about that quite a lot in Dubai. And funnily enough, the big AI question or topic came up quite a lot, didn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, it comes up now in every aspect. I mean, there's no point in running a session about AI because AI is in every session because it underpins everything from the sort of content creation to the data analysis to the sort of creation of marketing. It's just everywhere. And off the back of this discussion about sort of the different channels to use to sort of drive traffic, it also comes into how it plays a role in sort of kind of the media buying side of things. So how it can help with the sort of creative, how it can help with understanding the data, how it can sort of handle the volume, and how it can help sort of MVAS media buyers make much better informed decisions because they get so much more data. So what you constantly need to do because of this mix of different channels is need to keep making multiple kinds of marketing content for each of those channels, and you need to A/B test it for each of those fragments of the channels and keep doing that and keep analyzing that data and keep changing based on what it tells you. Doing that on your own as a puny human is really difficult, no, impossible, particularly for a lot of these MVAS companies because they don't have like the vast sort of data analysis teams that someone like say Netflix would have. But AI lets them do all this. It lets them create the creative, it lets them do the testing, it lets them then make decisions based on what that data from the testing tells them. And so it's like fundamental now to making this work in this fragmented world. As our friend Mahmood from Sam Agency very eloquently put it at the event.
So we still have the third sort of category of AI, which
That's right,
is
you said.
the analytical AI. So this is where the real AI power comes to play. A lot of people just think, or the misconception is that you take your data, dump it on ChatGPT, even ChatGPT Playground, which is the sort of more developer kit on the back end, and then you will ask questions. It doesn't really work so well. For example, we collect 200 touch points on the user journey. That means that the interactiveness with the campaign, the user sort of interactiveness with the page, and every event that comes after the user has subscribed. So billing notifications, customer care, sort of complaint, all of these things. Realistically, we have been doing it for 7 years. Was anyone looking for at it? Yeah, maybe some data analysts with like this wide of a screen, and then it was humanly impossible to actually draw all of the conclusions that were happening on these touch points. We, with the help of Humam, with our CTO, he's also a very sort of AI buff. We have our own local
That's
models.
the name of an actual person, not an AI model for mum, by the way.
Although you would mistake it. So we have local models that they are trained, and the philosophy that we follow is that if anything is targetable on the platform that we are using, in this case Google, we would draw connections between them, because eventually it doesn't make sense that let's say something that you cannot target and you cannot influence, that you would draw connection into that parameter. So anything that is targetable on Google, languages, IPs, sort of screen resolutions even, you would always find categorization towards a goal: higher ARPU, higher profit, lower complaints, all of these things. With AI, it's easy to draw the lines between all of these touch points, and then you don't have to be a data analyst to actually do it. So now media buyers have the power to actually have this, at least at a very deep level compared to the data analysts that used to work 3 years ago. You can have the same sort of proficiency with data that you can influence directly what happens on Google.
So there you have it. Interesting to hear Mahmood's views there. But I think what's really interesting, I would urge any of our viewers to go back to the beginning of that particular session. And Ansel asked a really brilliant question and said, before we start talking about the future, just try and paint a picture of what the process involved 3 years ago or even 5 years ago. And when you understand that data analysis, media buying, content creation would have been done by a number of different people, some being better at their jobs than others, all having to interact, all having to understand the various impacts that all of their different jobs could have ultimately on the successes of the campaign, you could understand that the job itself was an absolute nightmare. And I think, the point was made that generally speaking, it's, creativity probably suffered. There was a lot of people that ended up just sort of looking at other people's banners, and there was a lot of sort of copycat marketing. But the job in itself was absolutely impossible. And no surprise then that as AI has come into the frame now and started to not only make the connections between all the different pressure points that go towards creating a successful campaign, but also help content creators and media buyers do the data analytics even better than before, but on a much more, but also then being able to ask AI to help it and make it even better. So to me, this means from the MVAS media buying creative side of our industry, things are really going to go on an upward trajectory, because simply the quality and efficiency of what's being put out there in the telemedia market is infinitely more sophisticated than it was, even a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. I think what's interesting about this is that one, I think the fact that you can do all these things at much greater scale in a much more fragmented way because of AI, it means there's going to be more fragmentation and more channels, which makes it inherently more complicated. But hopefully, AI, as that develops, will keep pace with it. But what I think is really fascinating, and what I don't have an answer to, and I guess is something we can explore or will be exploring in Marbella, is that okay, this is brilliant and it totally levels the playing field pretty much, because it doesn't matter now who's got the best creative, who's got the best sort of data analyst. Everybody's pretty much the same. So how do you compete? How do you make your service rise to the top? How do you drive traffic to what you're selling when everyone's doing it equally as well? That's something that I think is the downside, perhaps, of how efficient and democratizing this AI model is. So I'd be interested to hear more about, or in Marbella in a couple of months' time, or indeed in the interim, if anyone wants to drop us a message. I'd be really interested to know where we go next, because sure, everyone can now do this.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously, one of the answers might be some people will use AI better than others, and you will have
Yes.
AI specialists. But of course, the other answer, it goes back to the same answer that we would have given, even 10 years ago. The best content will continue to generate the best traffic. The best subscriptions, if the user is enjoying the service, will continue to subscribe. And that's what we're going to kind of move on to now, because you did another session. Obviously, it's a fantastic content session, and I think that point was raised by Ashira, who are from India, where they talked about how they're developing their health and well-being service. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, they've got this Ashnaya wellness app. What's it? It's interesting on a number of levels, because one, wellness is a sort of newish category to the telemedia world, but it's a massive and exploding MVAS category worldwide. It's particularly big in India. But what's particularly interesting about what these guys have done is the way they've sort of brought it all together. So rather than having all these different wellness apps to do different things, it's one all in one place, which is, aggregation, always good, makes for a sort of simplicity. But the thing that's really interesting from a content point of view is that the wellness services themselves are, I guess, content, and that's what drives people to use them. But to stand out in this increasingly competitive wellness market, they're looking at doing interesting things like sort of allowing people to curate the music in their apps, and playing calming games and creating stuff like that around wellness, which is in itself like sort of the other parts of MVAS being pulled into this world, which is particularly interesting. And this is what Ashmita had to say about it at the event.
So we have incorporated create your own music as well, because, today when we see there are a lot of people who like to dance on their own beats. So curate your own music is something that we've already put in. We also have things like a lot of wellness tunes in place with us. So as I said, every consumer at the end of the day requires a one-stop solution. We are sick and tired of having zillions of applications in our phone where we do not kind of end up using it. So we try to curate that app which has music, not a competition, but music. We have that in store. We have a couple of games that we've already tied up with, but they're not going to be games which are going to be destructive, but they are, mind-building games is something that we try to incorporate where again, very curated content is what we're trying to cater to the world. And when we're reaching out to either, people who are above a 45, they have a certain kind of a mindset. They have very less time. So in that 5 minute, we would prefer somebody just to do a quick 5 minutes breathe and just calm down and then go back to their workspace rather than, just sitting on a mobile and having a 5 minute game session in which just kind of troubles them, oh shit, I just lost. So we're trying to build up that space where content becomes the king, but somewhere or the other just calms us down for the next step of our life.
So yeah, there you have it. That's in the wellness sort of sector. But it's a universal principle, isn't it? You've got to make these services compelling and useful. In the wellness case, you don't want to sort of do stuff that upsets people. You want to keep them calm. But also you need to give them compelling content and content that makes them come back for more. And that really, I mean, we talked earlier on about driving traffic and how you use social media, Google, and all that sort of thing. But equally, you need to have a really good service, really good content, really compelling proposition. That in itself will make people come back. And that's really, what you want, isn't it? You want to get people in through that sort of marketing channel, and then you want to make sure that the content keeps them coming back. And you've got to keep it fresh, you've got to keep it interesting, and you've got to keep it compelling.
Yeah, which obviously then in turn means that you're dealing with less complaints because you've got more happy customers, which, nothing new in saying content is king. But I guess that as we talked about, um, the better the service, the higher the quality, the more sticky it becomes, the happier the customer, and the longer you're going to be getting that subscriber to subscribe. And we're going to talk a little bit about how AI actually can also develop those services. What I did think was quite interesting, though, is that I had no idea until Ashmita pointed it out from a wellness point of view, but that there are destructive games and constructive games.
Yeah.
So was that the suggestion being that destructive games are games where you will ultimately lose, or there's a winner and loser?
Yeah, I don't know. I
Is that what they're called?
Well, yeah, they are, and I think I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't really play those sorts of games because I find, like, unlike everything else you do in life, the more you do it, the harder it gets to do. Usually, in the real world, like, the more you practice at something, the better you get. And I find it really frustrating and not very calming. And I think that's the point she makes: is you can't have a sort of game that gets progressively harder in a wellness app because it's just going to make you really
Yeah,
really
yeah,
stressed. So
yeah.
so they're going for, like, happy, nice, calming, relaxing games, not destructive shoot 'em up games where you just get blown to smithereens with
Yeah.
increased frequency.
I don't think any of us want that nowadays. But so we've established, as always, I think that content is king, and we've also established that telemedia industry is pretty committed to that, and has been for quite a long time, particularly in those established markets where there is an excellent ARPU which can justify the investment in the services and marketing and all that sort of thing. But we also then talked a little bit about how AI is helping content creators improve the quality of their services, but also a way of, I guess, personalizing or creating, more targeted type services. This relates to Roxanne's comments, and Roxanne's from Mobibase. What did you take away from that?
Yeah, well, her sort of view was that is broadly in agreement with what Ashmita was saying, what everyone else on that panel was saying, is that the content's got to be compelling. But to do that, you've got to keep making more and more content, and it needs to be sort of ever more interesting. It needs to be snackable. Like, how do you use what you've got and keep this volume of content coming? And of course, AI is where that's at. You use AI to create this snackable content. She mentioned things like match highlights, stuff like that, and things from esports, like using AI to pull out the interesting bits, repurpose it, repackage it, put that out, keep this constant flow of content coming, which is what also makes people keep coming back for more because it's constantly refreshed. But that is in itself a massive challenge because there's only so much content. But AI plays a really big role in overcoming that too. Here's what she said.
Can also create things automatically, like subtitles, which is very important to localize your content, so you can really automate it, these kind of things. Of course, you will need to pair it with a human because you have to be sure that it's relevant. There is no legal, let's say, risk, that it's, how to say, editorially interesting, but you can really create snackable content like a recap of matches, mini highlights. You can really automate things like that. Of course, you have to be sure that you don't put too much content generated by AI in your service because it can feel a bit generic, repetitive. But it's really something that is strategically and growing. There has a growing role. So it's still maturing. So you can do today a lot of things, but there is a real potential here. We also analyze that you can rotate the content based on the behavior of the user to show him the content that fits better his interest. So yeah, AI, we are working with it. We know that there is a real potential with it. So yeah, I will say let's just wait some months, years, and you will see that there is a big potential. Yeah.
So there you have it. Roxanne really clearly showed how AI is given, as I said earlier, the creative end of the marketing end of the telemedia industry, a real superpower, able to do so many of the jobs that either weren't possible or that now can be done at the touch of a button, which again, I see as being just ultimately an extremely positive thing because the bar in the telemedia industry for our services, for our marketing, for the efficiency of our marketing is getting raised day after day after day, which ultimately will mean that the market penetration of MVAS services across the globe, personalized services, great content, efficient marketing seems to be a trend and something that, I mean, it's almost a match made in heaven, right?
Oh, totally. It's, it plays out in every aspect of the telemedia industry. AI can do all sorts of things. It can create content, it can create marketing, it can analyze data. That in itself feeds into how content and marketing is created. It's just everywhere. But there is a corollary, I think, with this that recently Meta, who own Facebook and Instagram, have posited this idea of creating what they call infinite ads. So what they're proposing is that a brand who wants to advertise something, could be content, could be a product, whatever, comes to Facebook and says, this is what I want to advertise, this is what I want to sell, I need to sell it to these people. Facebook uses its massive amount of data and AI to create the adverts on an almost individual basis for each person who might be a target and keeps doing that. And it's an interesting idea, and it's the sort of, where AI is taking sort of ad creative. What it does is it suddenly destroys the ad industry. It means that Facebook is just now the ad industry. You don't need the agencies, you don't need all the others. Now, what if they do this with content? What if someone, Facebook or whoever, comes along and uses AI to create infinite personalized content for everybody? Suddenly there's no need for all the other content. So the whole content world is totally shaken up. The distribution possibly might be through Facebook or whoever does this. There might still be a role for MVAS. I guess networks will want content. They'll want to sell that through DCB and those sorts of things. So maybe they'll do that themselves. Maybe they'll do a deal with whoever does this. And again, it's speculative, but I think it's sort of definitely the direction of travel of where content and AI might be heading. And I put this to the panel, and James Flaherty from Perpetuum Media had some interesting but mixed feelings about it. This is what he said.
If you
gave that tool to my kids when they were 7 to create their own games. They'd go crazy. So that generation's out there that's going to embrace it, and we're going to look like dinosaurs in 10 years, right? Because they've taken it and run, and then our jobs, right? So I embrace all that stuff. I think it's great.
He thinks it's great, but he's going to be out of a job.
Possibly the way it's going to come for the content, come for our jobs, but it's great. So yeah, I think you need to be sort of optimistic, don't you? But I think that was quite an interesting part to finish that session on, because it sort of, you know, it's out there and it's something we're going to talk a lot more about, I think, with mixed feelings.
Yeah, I whilst I hear what you're saying about Facebook, a couple of things strike me. A, it might be very expensive ultimately.
Yeah.
But you know, we've seen so many new technologies come into the business, and particularly with AI, that, you know, it does seem to me that because everyone has access to AI, it's really, the success is going to be those people that are good at using AI. No, you know, no different to those people. Some people are good at creating content and others aren't. So I'm gonna stick with I think it's going to be a competitive market amongst those people that use AI the best. But I do take your point about Facebook and knowing so much about us. But that again, I think, applies to an awful lot of platforms. And so, you know, I still feel there's going to be quite a lot of competition in the market. And also, as we mentioned right at the beginning of the show, you know, whilst you can't just be as simplistic as saying Facebook's for old people and Instagram's for young people, there is some element of truth to that. And I would imagine that the people at Facebook are going to be quite worried that eventually their core users, the people that really, you know, embraced it from the beginning, are getting older and less interesting, and those new guys are somewhere else. And again, don't forget, you know, they're not the only show in town, as Chris mentioned earlier about Azerbaijan and China and Russia and South America. So I don't think it's too doom and gloom at this point. I think we should just celebrate the exciting messages that we've had so far, and enjoy our moment in the sun.
Oh, absolutely. I wasn't trying to be a naysayer. I just think it's quite interesting. But you're right, of course, that there'll always be someone who can do this better. And Facebook doing all the content is yeah, that's just going to be commoditized, boring, horrible stuff. There'll still be space for the really good stuff. And I think it's that sort of way the market will segment that's potentially very interesting. That and the creation of new channels. But, you know, the Russian government today has announced it's creating its own messaging service to rival Telegraph because it wants to keep it in country. I think we're going to see more of that sort of thing, but that's for another day.
I think you're right. Well, watch your space. Well, listen, thanks everyone for tuning in. Do remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. We love to hear from you. And Paul and I will be back in a couple of weeks' time, no doubt picking out some more highlights from the news, and also hopefully diving back into some of the expert opinions that we heard in Dubai and World Telemedia on the 11th of May. Do remember, you can watch on demand all of those conference sessions by going to wtevent.com. And in the meantime, Paul and I will go back to our day jobs, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. So thanks a lot, Paul. See you later.
Thanks, mate. Adios.